started, and then as soon as people start coming into the waiting room, we'll be able to see. Fingers crossed they will.
Oh, they're flooding in.
They're starting to come. Excellent. So welcome everybody starting to come in from the waiting room now. It's great to have you here. We're just letting everybody in as we speak, so bear with us and we will get started in just a second. If I can just remind you all as well, just as you are entering into the main room, if you just make sure you are on mute, that would be much appreciated, just so that we don't get any distractions whilst we are running this session. So I'm just going to wait for a couple more people to head in to the waiting room now. I think we've let in a few people. Excellent. And we'll get started in just a second. Perfect. So thank you all, as I said, for joining us so far today. This is our final session of the day on our day 2 of the Employability Fair. So I hope that you've had a great day so far and that you are ready and raring to go for our session with ARLA. So it's great to see you on our call. First of all, if you haven't already, please do follow us on social media. You can find us at Enactus UK on most social media platforms, and we also have an Enactus UK careers site if you're interested in employability on our Instagram page as well. This is a great way to not only connect with everything we are up to as an organisation, but also importantly, great to find out about things like this and the Employability Fair, so you can get involved. So we've seen quite a few people as well posting on social media about their experiences at the Enactus Employability Fair, which is brilliant. Please don't forget to always tag us, and we'll be more than happy to obviously like, comment and share. So just so that we get to start the talk in just a second, but if you are already aware of what we do here at Enactus and haven't yet been able to register your information, please do go to enactusuk.org/join and make sure you register to be eligible for all of our benefits. So I feel like we're still just letting a few people in from the waiting room as we speak, but we will get started because I'm conscious of the time that we have got this afternoon. So as I said, thank you so much for all joining us this afternoon. We are very glad to have you all here with us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Amy Brereton and I am the Chief Operating Officer here at Enactus UK. And I'm very happy to be on this session with you all today as we learn more about one of our fantastic partners at Enactus UK, ARLA. So before we get to the main part of the session, which I know you are all ready and raring to go for, I just wanted to take this opportunity to talk a little bit more about Enactus UK and who we are and why you should join us if you haven't already. So in short, Enactus is the UK's leading combined youth social action and youth social enterprise charity, developing thousands of young entrepreneurial spirits every single year. At Enactus UK, we believe our experiential platform is a great bridge between the world of work and higher education, as we work to develop the skills that often can't be taught in a classroom or a lecture theatre. So through our network, we bring together students, academics and business leaders to create student-led social and environmental enterprises, which work towards addressing one or many of the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which gives students an opportunity to really make a difference to their local and international communities, whilst building on both their personal and professional development skills. So currently, we operate in over 65 universities across the country with over 3,000 students and 219 social enterprise projects across the UK. So if you're interested in finding out more, if you haven't already, or just joining the Enactus UK programme, if I've already sold it to you, just on that little spiel there, please do not hesitate to reach out to us or join us and register your interest, as I said, at enactusuk.org/join, and I'll be able to connect you with the appropriate teams. Anyway, that is enough about Enactus. I will stop talking for the time being. We are here to find out more, as I said, about ARLA and about their opportunities. So I'm going to stop my screen sharing now and I'm going to pass over to Melanie and the team. There we go.
Hi everybody. I'm just going to share my screen with you guys, just so we can kind of do some introductions about who's on the call today, and then we can get started. You'll have to bear with me because I'm not a pro at this. Where are we? Just let me know when you can see my screen.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yep. Can everybody see that? Yeah. So here we are. There's myself, there's Daisy on the call, and there's also Rachel. So we'll just do some around the table introductions. So I'm Mel, and I recruit for all the head office commercial and sales roles. I work counterpart with Dom, who I'm not sure if you've come across him before, maybe on LinkedIn, but he kind of deals with like logistics, the like procurement side, and maybe like the marketing type of roles within head office. And I've been here over a year and a half now. So I actually started, my first day was during the pandemic. So it's nice to finally get back into the office and actually meet people in person. But yeah, it's been great since joining, and I'm just super glad that I'm part of this business. So that's a little bit about me. Daisy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So hi everyone, I'm Daisy. So as you can see, I recruit in supply chain. So I basically largely look after kind of our production recruitment, anything really from engineers up to kind of site director level roles, everything in between, kind of quality, environment, health and safety and stuff like that. So I've been with ARLA probably coming up about 2.5 years now, actually, which is crazy really to think about. In terms of my background, so I've been in recruitment about I think about 7 years now. Again, makes me feel really old. I started out in healthcare recruitment, and then moved over to manufacturing. So yeah, lovely to actually meet you all.
Hi, finally, I'm Rachel. So I'm 2 months into ARLA, so I'm one of the newest members of the team. I've come from a recruitment agency background, so I've spent the last 8 years recruiting engineers to like the water industry and construction, and I now look after all of our engineering roles with my colleague Alex within ARLA. So I'm not sure how much you guys know about ARLA as a business, but we're one of the UK's largest dairies. So we produce brands like Cravendale Milk, Lurpak, Bob Milk. So yeah, it's really nice to meet you all and looking forward to this session.
Thank you. So yeah, just moving on then. Now we've done a little bit of a around the table introductions. I guess today what we want to kind of just have a really open discussion with you guys about is just to touch on, I guess, like the interview preparation, maybe get what your thoughts are on, how you would prepare for an interview, and we can kind of give you it from our perspective, what we think, could be the best practice. And then again, we'll talk about like CV creation. So, what does your CV look like at the moment? What are the do's and don'ts kind of thing? How long, should it be? How should you say it out? So again, just kind of seeing what your thoughts are and, hopefully getting some tips from us perhaps. And then finally, approaching the job market. So what's the best way to kind of get more information on roles? Should you be using LinkedIn? Who should you approach? That kind of thing. How can you be proactive? So yeah, we've also got the chat box as well. So if you've got any questions, throughout this session, pop a message in there and we'll answer the questions as we go. But yeah, that's probably how today is going to go in a nutshell. And if you've obviously got any questions after this session, we'll share our details with you, so you can drop us a direct message. We'll be happy to help you in any way that we can, and potentially discuss any future roles. And that's, yeah, I think that's about it.
Yeah.
So are you happy for us to kind of kick it off with maybe questions and talking through maybe what we think for interview preparation?
Yeah, definitely.
Will one of you guys be able to, I'll actually stop sharing my screen because I can't see the chat box or anything. So I'll stop sharing my screen. So I guess we'll just kick it off with interview preparation. What do you guys think that you should do at the moment if you've got an interview? What are you doing right now? Has anyone had an interview so far they want to talk about or they want to help prepare for? Or are you happy for us to just go through what we think the best pointers might be?
it might be worth maybe going through the pointers first, because that might help kind of get some ideas flowing from the students.
Yeah, perfect. So I guess from our perspective, obviously there's no right or wrong whatsoever, but I certainly would be looking at the company and the role and doing some research into them as a business, for example, looking at the values and really thinking about what the agenda of that interview will be. Just so you feel really prepared, you're not kind of, flustered when you go into the interview. And I guess one thing that we probably see quite often is when you ask people why they've applied for that role and why that business, and they don't really know much about it. I think you should be quite passionate about the roles that you are applying for. So for example, if you're applying for numerous different roles within a business and you don't really have a set passion on which one it is, I guess it can be quite, it doesn't strengthen your application really. That's kind of what I'd say from that perspective. What about you?
Yeah, and I'd say as well, especially at say graduate level, you're not going to have sort of years and years work experience to talk about. But what you can bring to the table is sort of learnings through your degree, maybe during sort of any volunteering or work experience. And I think a lot of the time it's just as much about attitude and passion for the role, like Mel said, than it is the actual sort of hands-on experience. So really try and make that come across in the interview as well, and back up any sort of points with maybe some examples of when you've done something similar in the past, albeit probably in a different sort of capacity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just to build on that, I mean, one of the biggest tips I give to people, if you're going to generally speaking, if you're going to an interview with a large corporate business, which I'm sure some of you, that will be one of your aims, it will be quite a structured process. And my tip is always just over prepare, treat it like an exam. You literally want to come up with some examples of when you've kind of lived out the company's values or their competencies, and you want to revise them. I would literally be practicing them, with your mum and dad or your other half or your friend, and just make sure they're really kind of solidified in your mind, because you can then go into that interview and go in with that kind of level of confidence of actually, I really do have kind of relevant experience. But I think, as Rachel said, you might not have a great deal of career experience, and I really think you shouldn't be afraid to give personal examples.
Yeah.
When I was a bit younger, I did jury duty, and I've used that in interview scenarios. So it's not a professional example, but it kind of still gets a point across. So yeah, I think that's just one thing I would say. We've got a question as well.
Yeah, I think you answered in those how to prepare for like the interview process. There's some really good tips there. And like you said, being able to talk about yourself from a personal perspective. When I sit in on interviews, I see it come up quite a lot, just tell me a little bit about you. And some people, kind of a little bit afraid to, really paint the picture of who they are. But, you want to just be yourself. That's all you can be. And, tell them what you enjoy doing in your spare time. If you do any like extracurricular activities or anything like that, definitely shout about them. I guess that's probably what I'd say on like the interview prep.
Yeah, definitely. I think one other thing I would just mention, I don't know if anyone's familiar with like the STAR technique, if you're kind of giving example based answers in an interview. I recommend just Googling it if you're not familiar with it, but it basically stands for situation, task, action, response, and that's kind of the structure you want to try and stick to when you are kind of giving those example based answers in an interview. But yeah, certainly I think more and more, companies are really focused on kind of championing, the individual authenticity. They want you, we want you to kind of be able to bring your full self to work. So, it's just being able to get that across and kind of treating it as a conversation, I think, more than anything.
And I think maybe one other thing as well is at the end of the interview, a lot of the time you might be asked, do you have any questions? And I think if you haven't prepared stuff in advance, sometimes that can throw you perhaps a little bit. And if you say, oh, no, I don't have any questions, that might make the interviewer think, oh, they've not prepared. Whereas if you can go in, say, with like 2 or 3 questions, I wouldn't necessarily in the first interview ask what's the salary or anything like that, but perhaps you've got a question about the role itself, maybe about the background of the interviewer, what their career path's been within the company, perhaps asking about progression opportunities. So yeah, there's lots of things you can prepare maybe in advance, just have a bit of paper scribbled down if it's a virtual interview next to you, just so you've got a few questions in your mind to ask at the end. That's always a useful tip as well.
Yeah, and if they've answered some of the questions throughout, say, you know, you've answered some of the questions that I actually had for you, you know, there's nothing wrong with saying that, but yeah, hopefully we'll have a few more on your little list that you could perhaps ask. But yeah, I think that's probably it in a nutshell.
Yeah, does anyone else have any more questions?
Specifically on like the interview preparation, anything?
Okay, so how should we answer salary related questions? So I think for salary, just be honest about what you're looking for. Most recruiters will ask you that question because they want an honest answer. Yeah, I think that's the main thing. Just be open and honest. And I think also, you know, don't be afraid of a little bit of negotiation sometimes as well. It's important, you know, really, if a business is hiring you, they want you to be comfortable in the role, and they want you to be comfortable in the role for a good period of time. So if you can't have those open, honest conversations from the beginning about, you know, ultimately something which is very important, then it might hinder you in the future, or mean that you can't stay as long as you'd hope. So yeah, I'd just say just be honest, really.
And I think there's nothing wrong as well as if you put on the spot, perhaps ahead of an interview and a recruiter or a recruitment agent asks you what salary do you want, you can be honest and say, look, I don't, maybe it's a role in a new area, maybe you don't actually live in the location, and you could say, well, in my head I'm thinking this, however I need to check what rent looks like in the area, or travel time, commute time. So don't worry about maybe not holding them to an exact figure. And I think don't be afraid to push back as well and ask the recruiter what the budget is for the role. They might not have a set salary, but there could be a banding that you at least have got an idea of a rough suggestion of where the salary's at, and you'll know whether that fits in with your lifestyle and what your expectations are as well.
I think just to stay on the questions about salary, how do we do our homework? How do we conduct our homework related to salary? I think you just have to have a conversation with the recruiter. A lot of companies, ourselves included, you know, with quite good reason, won't advertise salary. But we will always have a conversation with candidates that have applied for the role about salary, you know, at that kind of screening, that initial screening call. So you just, you know, if the recruiter doesn't bring it up, then you ask the question. And if it's not on the advert and you're not sure whether to apply, you know, just reach out to the recruiter, or, you know, whoever the contact is on the advert, and you can ask for a conversation, and I'm sure they'll be happy to have that conversation with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think there's another question about international students applying for the first job in the UK.
Yeah, so I mean, I suppose it might be good to understand a bit more detail behind what it is that you kind of think you might struggle with. I guess, you know, for me, you shouldn't really be at any disadvantage, to be honest. But I guess if you wanted to kind of maybe find out a little bit more about, you know, what you could put on your covering letter to make your experience appear, you know, very relevant, or how you could tailor your CV to the role, again, I would just recommend that, you know, you reach out to the recruiter really and have that conversation. But, you know, I wouldn't have thought that you would, you know, be at any disadvantage there really. As long as you can show that you have a kind of a knowledge of, you know, UK working practices within your CV.
Another question there from Amelia is, from an employer's perspective, what skills are most valuable from students? I think from my perspective, if we were, you know, hiring, like, for example, like grads and stuff like that, I think it's about, you know, understanding people's reasons for that role and the passion for it, you know, and the fact that it is something that you really want to be in and you've got your reasons for it, and just getting that across, you know, the enthusiasm for that role, and why you're so passionate about it. Would you say you've got anything else to add from that in terms of skills?
Obviously it depends on the degree. Obviously a lot of university degrees are very different, but I think you can show your dedication. You've spent minimum of 3 years learning something that you're passionate about. You're good at note taking, you're good at maybe essay writing, exams. So there's a lot of transferable skills that will serve you, maybe memory skills. So there's so many things that you can talk about that have been related to your degree. Even things like you might have played a team sport or done something, like I said before, volunteering while at uni. So there's so many things you can talk about that would be a big advantage to an employer.
Yeah.
I think a lot of graduate schemes have got some core competencies as well, haven't they? That you can always like look up and see like what the core competencies are for the organisation that you're applying, and everything you're doing, like make sure that you've got examples, I guess, for them when you go into an interview situation, because they're all going to be different, aren't they?
Totally, and I think that probably leads on to another question that we've got, you know, how you prepare kind of CV related questions in an interview, how you prepare for that. And again, it's just about really understanding the organisation, understanding what their competencies are, what their values are, you know, what the role entails. And again, most recruiters will be open to having a conversation with you at that application point, so you can get all that information. So, and actually, you know, at the very worst case, you can go on Google and you can Google some kind of standard core competencies, and a lot of them will be similar for a lot of different businesses, to be honest. Things like teamwork and problem solving, communication, whatever it might be. So, you know, there's a lot of resources out there that you can utilise.
Do you recommend video CVs apart from, you know, perhaps text CVs? I wouldn't say we've had video CVs. Personally, from our perspective, we did actually have video CV, but I guess it just depends on, for example, the company, if they accept video applications and stuff like that. I'm not sure, it's definitely not part of our process that we've got, but I think it probably would. There will be some companies that do accept them, I imagine.
And I think a lot of companies, I know we don't personally do that here, but a lot of companies use something called ATS tracking. So when you apply for a role through their website, it has to be in a certain format, otherwise it won't actually go through to the recruitment team and they won't be able to view it properly. So, I mean, we can talk about that a bit later when we go on to the CV section, but yeah, just make sure that you do look and see if you are applying through like a portal or something like that, that your format is correct, because even sometimes putting a PDF document in might not work. So just check when you apply, it should tell you what format you can use and can't use.
Yeah. I guess we've had quite a few questions on like around CV, so I guess if we could move on to CV creation. I know somebody has put in there, I guess.
I'll try to answer any that aren't about CVs, shall I?
Yeah, if you can do. Yeah, so someone said, as a fresher, one might not have any prior work experience, so is it fine not to have work experience in our CV? I guess from our perspective, you know, when you are writing, for example, your CV, you know, you want it to be quite clear and professional when somebody looks at it. And I guess when you are applying for example, like graduate roles and stuff like that, you know, they're getting hundreds of applications. So the first few things that they will be looking at to kind of make sure that you tick the boxes is like your degree, the classification, perhaps what university you went to, the A level. So you want that to be not on the last page. You want it to be quite straight in front of everybody's eyes, sort of thing, and very clear. And I guess as well, you know, in terms of experience, you know, you want to have on there, you know, all of the work experience that you have done, and if you've not got any, that's fine, but perhaps you've done voluntary work. So I definitely would recommend putting that on there, and any extracurricular activities that you're involved in, you know, even if it is something, for example, like sports or something that you do outside of like you know, education, definitely would recommend putting it on there. I think the more that somebody can get from you and what you're involved in from your CV, I think it creates more of a picture for you. Yeah, I would say that.
Yeah, and I think as well, rather than just putting the name of your degree down, if you've not got much work experience to talk about, why don't you expand on that? You could name some of the modules you've done, maybe talk a bit about say if you've done like a dissertation or a group project for your final year, what did that involve? And I think there's certain obviously modules that you've done that might actually include a lot of relevant skills. Maybe if you did say, I don't know, like a science degree, perhaps maybe you've used some lab-based technologies or equipment that could be relevant. So yeah, feel free to actually expand on that as well, rather than just naming your degree. If you want to bulk that out a bit and add a bit more extra detail in there, obviously as long as it's relevant.
Yeah, and I guess coming around to CV creation, you know, I guess if you've not, obviously, if you're a graduate and you've obviously not got tons of work experience, it's probably going to be a shorter CV, which is fine. You know, you only want your relevant information on there, but you don't want to leave it too vague. So that's why we say put as much in as you can. And like Rachel's just said, you know, talking about like your modules, which is great. Somebody did actually ask in the chat, you know, is it worth making your CV like stylish or leave it quite plain? I think, for example, if you was applying for example, a marketing graduate scheme or something, you might want to make it look a little bit, perhaps bring it to life a little bit, put your personality on it. But for most roles, I think I'm probably right in saying that just keeping it quite in a plain and simple format is probably the best way. And especially like you said with the ATS thing, if it's not in a certain format, it might not be accepted.
I think it does depend on the sector. Like my boyfriend, he works in like the digital world and he's very creative, and his CV format is completely different to mine. I came from a science background and I've worked in recruitment, so my Word document looks very different to his jazzed up 2-page document. But that's not to say that either is wrong. It just depends, like I said, what you're applying for and what it is you're going into. But there's loads of good templates online if you are struggling, and you need to know where to start. There's some really good resources that you can look at as a guide.
Yeah, I agree. I think just to add in terms of like content of CV, for me, I would just say try to really like frame it around your achievements rather than just the activities that you've done, whether that's in a job or in a degree or whatever it might be. You really want to paint a picture of what you've achieved, because it also shows that you're quite focused on achieving things and that you're quite goal oriented, which particularly if you're going through a grad scheme, that's really important because you are ultimately kind of going through a program, you know, and there'll be a lot of learning involved. So yeah, I'll just add that.
Have we answered most of the questions around CV creation? We're happy to move on, or is there anything that I've missed?
One thing I'd say as well, I mean, this might become more relevant as you do get more work experience, but I think try and format it that it's in chronological order. Put your education at the top and maybe a bit of an opening paragraph about yourself, and then go into that work history and make sure that dates of employment are on there as well. Because that way we can look at things like how long you've perhaps stayed in the job, if you've maybe had a promotion during that time, or if there was any career development. So yeah, just make sure you're thinking about the format as well when you are putting that CV together.
Perfect. Let's move on to approaching the job market then. So I guess when you are approaching the job market, I guess really you need to be quite selective in the jobs that you're applying for. You know, for example, as a recruiter, they could be put off if you're applying for random various different roles within the business, making over 10 applications. I guess it doesn't show that you're consistent in what you really want. So I would say focus on what you're looking for, and that should hopefully obviously help you with your applications. I think LinkedIn is a really powerful way of connecting with people. So don't be afraid of reaching out to, you know, for example, people in certain businesses and asking them about their schemes or their roles that they've got, or asking them if, you know, you could have a quick chat to discuss some of the positions and maybe find out more about the culture, or, you know, the opportunities or when they become available. I think doing that actually shows that you're quite proactive, you're keen, you're using your own initiative. So I definitely think, you know, if someone reaches out to me on LinkedIn, you know, I'm happy to have a chat with them and tell them a little bit more about the business and, you know, hopefully help you make the right decision in which applications you're going to put forward. So I definitely think, you know, don't be scared to, you know, put yourself out there and just find out more information, because obviously it's your future. You want to make sure you're finding the right opportunity for you and that it offers the right aspects for your career. So I guess that's kind of what I'd say when approaching the job market. And, you know, again, I think applying for the right roles, making sure you are selective, because it's very competitive, certain like grad schemes and stuff. And yeah, I guess you just really need to think about your application so that hopefully you've got a very strong chance of perhaps getting to like interview stage.
I was just going to say, I think as well it's important to keep an eye and find out when the deadlines for applications are, because a lot of the time, especially at graduate level, it's not a case of just uploading a CV. There will be sort of competency-based questions, or it can be quite intensive and takes time, and you don't want to rush these applications because, like Mel said, it's really competitive. So make sure that you're being organised, know deadlines, reach out to people if you're not sure, find out, and just, yeah, make sure you're allocating enough time to get the best application together that you can.
I think as well, just to kind of build on what Mel was saying, it is really important to apply for the right roles for you. I know that it can be quite easy to kind of just end up applying for everything, but I think what can happen is that can kind of dilute your sense of direction. And, you know, particularly for you guys, what you want to do when you're, you know, going into a grad scheme, for example, or, you know, interviewing for a grad scheme, is you want to really show a very clear sense of direction. If I look back on kind of our recruitment every year, you know, those are the people that end up getting the roles, as people that really have that, you know, that drive and that clear end goal. So I just say, you know, do be fussy and just have faith in the fact that you can get the job if it's the right job for you, you know, rather than just kind of applying for everything that comes up.
Yeah. Yeah. Have we got any other questions around that? Maybe the approach that anybody wants to ask now, or anything else?
Or any other questions?
Just having a look now. Like I say, if anyone thinks of any questions outside of this, you know, feel free to LinkedIn with us, drop us a message. We can share our email addresses as well, and we're happy to put some time in and have a chat with you. So if you can't think of anything now, you know, we're definitely available afterwards.
I think a lot of the questions have been answered in the chat as well, haven't they? I think you've been going through them, Daisy. I don't know if there was anything from the questions in the chat, Daisy, that you think would be useful for maybe just to pull out. I know people asked about the F15 scheme a couple of times. I don't know if there was anything more around that you wanted to pick out now. Just looking.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll caveat, I've not, so F15 is recruited, it's really kind of recruited essentially globally, so I've not got, you know, the greatest amount of knowledge on it. I have shared a link where it's a bit of like a landing page for F15 where people can go and have a look, but I mean, essentially it's our Future 15, so it's our Future Leaders program. So what F15 does is it kind of elevates you quite quickly within ARLA to a managerial level. So once you've done the F15 program, and within that program you'll get a lot of kind of mentoring, coaching. We do quite a lot of psychometric testing within ARLA, and we do kind of deliver development sessions with our F15s while they're going through the program to really help them get that kind of level of self-insight and work on themselves, and essentially get to that point where they really can be effective people managers. And I do know a lot of our F15s have gone into, you know, some really quite senior roles. You know, ultimately, a lot of them will go into kind of leadership roles on site within the leadership team. So yeah, it's a really, really great way of elevating yourself. And if you feel that you're very people oriented, and you also maybe want to kind of get into leadership within supply chain, it's a great opportunity.
I think there's about 3 rotations that you have as well, and obviously you kind of decide on you know, which countries or sites you kind of get to put your preferences in, but again, the logistics of it will be worked out the further down the applications that you go. But ultimately 3 different rotations, which will give you some great experience throughout the business. But yeah, click on that link, and if you've got any other questions afterwards, you know, do reach out to us. Someone has actually said, do you recommend a picture on the CV? Personally, I don't think I really see it that much in like the UK really. I think it depends. I think if it was, for example, you know, maybe again a marketing role or something like that, and you maybe make your CV a little bit more jazzy, some people do you know, put the picture on there. But for me, you know, it doesn't make a difference if I saw a CV with or without a picture on. It wouldn't make a difference. I guess I'm looking at your experience, your skills, and your reasons for applying for like that role and the match of that. So I guess it's personal preference.
One thing you might be able to do if you wanted to, maybe if you didn't want to put a picture on there, you could share a link to your LinkedIn profile. If you feel like your profile's got a lot of information on there, maybe a picture that looks professional, feel free to do that underneath your contact information at the top. Yeah, that might be it. I
think these days as well, I think you can actually put your QR code on there, which I've seen. I think that looks quite smart actually. I quite like the idea of that. So yeah, really good shout that, Rachel.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think pictures, it kind of, you can take it or leave it. It's not going to impact my decision at all, but I wouldn't say, if you're not super comfortable whacking a big old picture of yourself on your CV, then please don't feel like you have to. There are a couple of other questions just before.
Yeah, I think we've seen one there saying, you know, what do you think will make an application stand out? Anything that we should definitely look out for while applying? I think making an application stand out is, you know, your reasons for applying for that role, your relevant you know, experience or, you know, personal passion for that role needs to come across. If you just kind of put in, you know, for example, cover letters, I think do a cover letter if it is going to be worth doing it. You know, I see cover letters and some people just say, hi, please see attach my CV for this role. That's, for personally, it's a waste of time doing that type of cover letter. If you're going to do a cover letter, you need to say why you are really suitable for it, why you're applying for it, and why you know, you should ultimately be getting the role. That's kind of my best tips for that.
And I think following on that, it might sound silly, but make sure that the CV you send in is tailored for that role. You might have, say, one generic CV, but if you see a role, perhaps, I don't know, say if it is for an engineering position in a company like ARLA, don't say on your CV in the opening paragraph, I want to work for an engineering company in the rail sector, because obviously that straight away is going to think, oh, they've just sent this to loads of places. They don't actually care about ARLA. So just make sure that what you are writing, say on a cover letter or in that opening paragraph, is tailored to where you're actually applying to.
Yeah, because again, I think that comes down to like the competency as well. So if it's a really difficult decision between you and another candidate, and you've attached a cover letter that you've applied for a different company, you know, again, or you've got, you know, spelling mistakes, and they've got to decide between you and a, you know, a similar candidate of experience, things like that could be the reason why you're not progressed to the next stage. So it's just really making sure you spend time in your application, you have tailored it, and you know, you've literally really thought about why you're applying for that role. Yeah, I would say that's probably it in a nutshell.
That might be a good question. Oh, sorry, Daisy.
I was just going to say, what was I going to say? In terms of how you format it, and we talked a lot about, like, do you want to put your picture on? Do you design it in a special way? Do you do a video CV? Just really think about the role you're applying for. You know, I'm a recruiter, recruitment's very targeted, therefore my CV will always be quite focused around, you know, the KPIs that I've achieved and the things I've achieved, because it's all about being goal oriented. If you're applying for a tech role or a design based role, you might want to do something a bit more techy. So it's just really using your initiative and really just thinking about the role that you're applying for, I'd say.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, maybe that asks a good question about what pitfalls do you see people fall into, that maybe would be good things to avoid, or even in your own experience, like what pitfalls maybe did you fall into as a student when you first were looking for a graduate job, and what advice would you maybe give to the students on the call today?
So
I put you on the spot there, haven't I?
From my own experience, I found personally, being honest, I found it all a bit daunting, I think, when I was in final year. I did a science-based degree based around pharmacology, but it wasn't pharmacy. And I think a lot of recruiters, when they saw me applying for grad schemes, assumed that I was a pharmacist. So I ended up going to interviews at some big pharmaceutical companies, probably wasn't prepared enough, and maybe didn't go into enough detail about my actual degree. So I was in front of the hiring manager on the spot, absolutely flapping, because it turned out I didn't have the chemistry modules I needed to do the job. And I was embarrassed, and I thought I went all the way to the other end of the country. It was a waste of time. And that really made me realise that it is a case of applying for things you actually want to do and not feeling pressured just to apply for things that maybe your course mates are applying for that you don't necessarily have a passion for or really want to do. Because I think that really came across when I was actually at the interview, that I was a bit overwhelmed and probably not in the right space for what I actually wanted to achieve and go on to do. But yeah, I'm trying to think of any other examples from the recruitment side.
I think being quite honest as well, you know, like for example, you might not have that much experience to put on your CV, but again, being honest with the extra things that you do, being honest with the stuff that you are volunteering for or involved in, or the placements that you've had, because it has caught people out before where they say that they do X, Y, and Z, and you come to discuss it at interview, and you know, it's hard to discuss it because you've not actually done it. You've done it because you thought it was okay to put that on there, but you're not being true to yourself. And I think, you know, when it comes to being asked about certain experiences, you will struggle then. So I've seen that happen quite a bit. So I'd say just be very honest. and that's, you know, the main thing that you can do. I think spelling mistakes, 100%. I think, you know, when you see it happen, you're a bit like, oh, so just take your time. Spell check that. You know, take your time, go over it. If you're ever unsure, ask someone else to read over it before you make an application. If you are going to do a cover letter, make sure it's worth doing a cover letter. Read the actual job description and the key skills that they're looking for. Give them examples of why, you know, you're going to be a good fit. Talk about the values of the business so that they're fully aware that you've well researched the company. I think, yeah.
And I think it sounds silly again, but make sure you're attaching the right document when you apply for roles. I've had it before where I've seen people's phone bills or blank Word documents, and yeah, just make sure that when you've spent all this time putting this application together, make sure you're actually attaching the right document at the end, because it's probably something simple that you'll miss, you'll not see, the application will leave, you'll have no idea what you have or haven't attached, and that could make the difference between us actually seeing your application and not. So yeah, just make sure you take your time, like Lauren Daisy said.
Yeah.
I think the only other thing I would probably mention is just thinking about, so as recruiters, you know, we read through a lot of CVs, and, you know, I think if most recruiters are being honest, do they read every CV, you know, front to back, word for word? Probably not. You know, we kind of have learned to pick out keywords and key things that we're looking for. So again, if you can just tailor it to the kind of the advert or the job description or the values of the business as much as possible, try to get those keywords in there. But I think also do try to steer away. I'm not one of these people that says your CV can't be longer than a page, but I think steering away from lots of detail or very wordy content, you know, make your content as succinct as possible. You kind of want it short and snappy and accessible. You know, think about, like, I don't know, advertising, you know, they're not, if you look at an advert, it's not going to be really, really wordy. It has to be short, snappy. You're selling yourself, so just try to kind of keep that in mind, I suppose, when you're structuring it.
I think bullet points can be quite useful with that. And again, if it says on the advert Excel, and you know you can use Excel, but it's not on the CV, we won't know that as recruiters. We don't naturally know that you're good at Excel, when in fact you could be. So yeah, just make sure that if there is something that's essential on the job advert and you've got it, obviously don't lie, but if you've got that skill or that experience, make sure it's on the CV before you send it.
Yeah, good advice.
So
I think as well, oh sorry Daisy, just really quickly just on that point, I think for a lot of people, if you are graduating, don't forget that your career services within your university usually support students up to 3 years afterwards. So things for like CV clinics, CV checks, like check-ins, even just that spelling, if English isn't your first language, maybe just going to them and just helping them just to kind of support in terms of making sure that it is written English, that might be useful for you. So don't forget to kind of use those services as well if you've got them available at your university, because they might be useful in then obviously making sure that you're not falling into the pitfalls that obviously Mel, Rach and Daisy just mentioned just then for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, use any tool and resource you can, because it'll all be really useful.
Yep, and I think we've got through most of those questions. Thanks, Daisy. I know someone said, you know, do you have assessment centre tests, and what kind of tests are they? You know, behavioural or numerical based? And Daisy just said, you know, we do some tests called PI, which is predictive index, and under that falls behavioural and cognitive assessments that we put through. You know, if you're successful through the applications, you would do that. But like Daisy said, it's not something that's, you know, really heavily weighted on that. It's quite a simple test. One's a behavioural test, which just kind of asks you what motivates you, what drives you, how you like to be worked with. And then the cognitive one is where we're kind of just looking at like your numerical ability, abstract reasoning, verbal reasoning questions. So again, they are quite straightforward. So I wouldn't panic or overthink on those, because they are very straightforward. Yeah, and I think we're up to date with that.
Yeah, I think that's everything. Yeah.
What made you become a recruit? Good question. I kind of just fell into recruitment, really.
Everyone does.
Yeah. It's not something that I really thought, you know, I grew up and thought, oh, you know, I'd want to be a recruiter. I think it's, for me, I like the fact that it was, it's really fast paced. Before I came into internal recruitment, I was doing agency recruitment, and it was more of a, quite a sales role really. So you obviously had to, get the jobs on, get the candidates, make sure they started so you got paid. So it was a full 360 thing. So there's a lot of, I think it is a really good career person. I think it gives you a lot of transferable skills, because if you go into like agency recruitment, you can move internally, you can kind of be a consultant. There's so many different things you can do. But for me now, working for ARLA as obviously an internal recruiter, it's being able to bring talented people into the business and seeing them flourish through as well, and knowing that they're a really good match for the role that we have, like that gives me great satisfaction. What about you, Daisy?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I definitely fell into it, I think if you've got the gift of the gab a little bit, then that's generally the kind of people that tend to go into recruitment if you're good at talking, which I think we all probably are. But yeah, no, it's really people focused, and particularly internal recruitment, you do a lot of stuff with kind of helping to like develop talent internally and stuff like that, and it's just really rewarding. And particularly for me, I do our apprenticeship recruitment every year, and it's so rewarding, helping people to start their careers, and even better when you work for a business that you're passionate about, really, and that you believe in.
Yeah, same here. And there is a big difference between internal recruitment and recruitment agency side, but both have their advantages, and both very different, but both are very, very rewarding. And then someone's asked what current big projects are ARLA working on. So a big part of ARLA's culture is continuous improvement. So a lot of our sites and our core beliefs are based around continually improving processes. Everybody's ideas are welcome. So whether you've been in the business for a week or 20 years, everyone's opinions are valid and anyone can bring things to the table. So a lot of what we're looking at the moment is around obviously sustainability. There's a lot of engineering projects going on, big capex investments, about improving technology, streamlining processes. So yeah, there's absolutely loads going on, and I think that's the advantage of working for a global business as well. There's so much variety and so much happening at the moment. It's a really exciting time.
I think I'll just answer this final question, and then I'm conscious of time. But in terms of how we tackled the pandemic, it was very, very, very busy for us, particularly for our site. Obviously, you all know there was a really high demand for food, and in particular, really dairy. Everyone was eating loads of cheese last year. I think they were all eating their feelings, and lots of Lurpak. Sales went through the roof for Lurpak, but. What we did from a kind of a actual production perspective is we have things called SKUs. So that's kind of different types of product that we'll make at a site. We reduced our SKUs massively. So really took the complexity out of production at all of our sites. And actually, I think they've made a rod for their own back, because a lot of our sites have kind of surpassed all of their previous personal bests, and shown just how much they can do. So yeah, that's how we handled it, but we've come out of it really, really strong. As I said earlier, we've just had 2 record years in a row, so we're really fortunate that we're in a very good position.
Yeah. I've had another one there. Currently pursuing my masters from the University of Liverpool. We'll be graduating in November. I'd like to know if there are any graduate opportunities available for me to apply to now. When are the intakes? Because I know Dom is leading on that.
So I think it's kind of back end of this year that he'll be starting recruitment for our grad scheme. So I would just recommend that you go onto our careers page and sign up for alerts, and you'll get an alert as soon as that comes up. Alternatively, you can reach out to one of us or reach out to Dominic Shearing on LinkedIn, and he'll be able to give you a bit more information. So we'll share all of our kind of contact details with you before, just after we've wrapped up, and then you can reach out to us. I think just to touch on that question about HR, we don't have a HR grad scheme, unfortunately, so it's difficult for us to say kind of exactly what we'd be looking for. I would just recommend, again, maybe Pooja, if you want to reach out to one of us, it might be that we can see if there's any scope for, at least a conversation with someone that does work in kind of generalist HR. So yeah, feel free to drop one of us a message.
How can you contact us? So on LinkedIn, we will share, I think Amy said you would share the slides with them, so it has our names on there, but we're all on LinkedIn. We can share our email addresses as well, but yeah, if you've got any questions, just feel free to reach out to us, and we can, you know, have a chat with you about them. And I guess in terms of like applying for the graduate roles, like Daisy said, you know, when they're live, you know, you can go onto the ARLA website, sign up for the alerts, so you'll be the first one to kind of be notified for them. Or for more direct information, Dom is probably the guru. So yeah, Dominic Sheeran, definitely connect with him on LinkedIn, and he'll kind of be able to tell you in terms of like dates when stuff goes live. Yeah. Oh, you're all very welcome.
Yeah. Thank you very much for
thanks, everyone,
listening to us ramble on, but we do really hope you found it useful.
Yeah,
I think it's been really useful, and some really great information, obviously, about how to apply CVs, how to approach the jobs as well. So really, really good. So I hope everybody has enjoyed this session this afternoon with ARLA. As Melanie, Rachel and Daisy said, please feel free to contact them on LinkedIn. We will be sending out all of the recordings and all of the kind of information from the sessions, but you will also be able to find them on Friday on our YouTube page. So head over to Enactus UK and make sure that you go and look on there, and that's where all of these sessions recordings will be. But I think on behalf of us all, thank you so much, Melanie, Rachel and Daisy, for your time this evening, and I hope you all have a great rest of your evening now.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks,
You're more than welcome.
Thanks for having us.